ओम सदाशिवसमारंभां शंकराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ओम अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चिन्मयं व्याप्य यत्सर्वं त्रैलोक्यं च चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। सर्वश्रुतिशिरोरत्नविराजितपदाम्बुजः वेदान्ताम्बुजसूर्यो यः तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चैतन्यशाश्वतशान्तो व्योमातीतो निरञ्जनः बिन्दुनाथकलातीतः तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चैतन्यशाश्वतशान्तो व्योमातीतो निरञ्जनः बिन्दुनाथकलातीतः तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ज्ञानशक्तिसमारूढः तत्त्वमाला विभूषितः भुक्तिमुक्तिप्रदाता च तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अनेकजन्मसम्प्राप्तकर्मबन्धविदाहिने आत्मज्ञानप्रदानेन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। शोषणं भवसिन्धोश्च ज्ञापनं सारसम्पतः गुरोः पादोदकं सम्यक् तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। न गुरोरधिकं तत्त्वं न गुरोरधिकं तपः तत्त्वज्ञानात् परं नास्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। मन्नाथः श्रीजगन्नाथः मद्गुरोः श्रीजगद्गुरोः मदात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुरादिरणादिश्च गुरुः परमदैवतं गुरोः परतरं नास्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देवदेव। यत् सत्त्वेन जगत् सत्यं यत् प्रकाशेन भाति यत् आनन्देन नन्दन्ति तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ नमः प्रणवार्ताय शुद्धज्ञानैकमूर्तये निर्मलाय प्रशान्ताय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमव्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तिसुदेशिकेन्द्रं द्वैपायनं सूत्रकृतं मुनीन्द्रं श्रीशङ्करं भाष्यकृतं यतीन्द्रं मद्देशिकञ्चापि नमामि विद्यै। ॐ नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्यासम्प्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंशऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितप्रज्ञानगणः प्रत्यगर्तो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्ददामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दुग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोण तथा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला। अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सुतीर्णाः खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः। पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थघण्टोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितं लोके सज्जनषट्पदैरहरः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमल प्रध्वंसिनः श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवं यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनः यस्यान्तं न विदुःसुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः. Shri Krishnaya Paramatmane Namaha. Pranams everyone. So after finishing this introduction to Vedanta, we have started on this Bhagavad Gita. Before starting on this Bhagavad Gita classes, I would want to actually remind certain things that we had discussed earlier in terms of when we started with this introduction to Gita, Vedanta also. The things that I want to actually bring out is, one, this class will be in a very detailed manner, in the sense we will not be rushing through the Bhagavad Gita slokas. We would be taking sloka by sloka, word by word, try to understand the meaning and the context around it and the lessons from there. So this typically, a entire Bhagavad Gita, to go through the entire Bhagavad Gita will take a few years if we have weekly one class. So you will have to first understand that it's not going to be a one chapter in one class or one sloka in one class kind of session. The second thing is, as far as this class is concerned, the lessons that we are taking are based on Advaita philosophy. So if you have been already listening to some other lectures, as in from a different school of thought, a Dvaita philosophy or a Visishta Dvaita philosophy, there could be some confusions in some slokas. If you listen deeply enough, you would be able to see the difference or understand the difference. Whatever I am actually teaching has been from my gurus. I have been learning from the gurus, from acharyas who have been learning from their gurus. So it is Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam, that Guru Parampara. And if there are any mistakes that I make, it is entirely mine. But every credit to whatever I speak goes to my gurus. There is nothing that I have brought out here as my knowledge. It is the knowledge that has been passed around by gurus from their gurus and so on. If you have any kind of questions or comments, you can feel free to share in this group, either in the middle of the sloka if you want to, or at the end of the class, as the case may be. So, Bhagavad Gita, before we get into this, the first chapter of Gita, in fact, the other thing that I would want to say is, I would not be going from the first chapter onwards. Typically, Bhagavad Gita is taught from first chapter onwards. But when I had this discussion with Pujya Sri Swami Omkarananda Swamiji, before he had attained Samadhi, he had advised me to go through a certain pattern. In my other class, I'm using the same pattern. I'm going through the same pattern, which would be, I would be going into, first I will be giving an introduction. The introduction itself could be for a few classes. Then after that introduction, I will be going through 4 slokas of chapter 13, which will cover the values. After those 4 slokas of chapter 13, we will go to chapter 16, which will be the Devi Asuri Sampat, where again we will be learning on the values. So 13 followed by 16, a few slokas of 13, the entire chapter of 16. Then we will go to chapter 15, which will give the summary of Vedanta again, and then followed by chapter 12, and then we will come back to chapter 1. And from there onwards, we will go in a serial manner from chapter 1 onwards. So this is going to be the order in which we will be taking these classes. Before again going into the Bhagavad Gita itself, in this class, maybe I thought we'll give some understanding about why Bhagavad Gita. Why should we study Bhagavad Gita? As in the greatness of, what is the greatness of Bhagavad Gita? See, our culture, that is Indian culture, it is based on the Vedic scriptures. We call it Vedic scriptures. In our introduction to Vedanta, we have seen what are those Shastras. We have seen that in detail in one full class. So our culture is based on this Vedic scriptures. And therefore the Indian culture itself, we can call that to be Vedic culture. And this Vedic culture happens to be a very religious culture. It is a lifestyle that can never separate secular and sacred. In today's world, we call certain activities to be secular activities, to certain activities to be sacred activities. But in our lifestyle, in our culture, everything is religious in nature. That is, there is nothing that can be separated from religion. Life and religion are intertwined. And what do we mean by religious culture? A religious culture meaning a Bhagavan-centered life, an Ishvara-centered life. Whenever I use Bhagavan or Ishvara, it means the same. So it is entirely religious in nature. Our day begins with the remembrance of Ishvara. Generally, our culture does not begin with bed coffee. That bed coffee is materialistic culture. Our culture starts with Suprabhatam. Or even before, when we get up, we rub our hands when we say Karagre Vasade Lakshmi, Karamadye Saraswati, Karamule Sthite Gauri, Prabhate Karadarshanam. So we pray to Bhagavan first. And even before we have to step our legs on the floor, we worship Bhuma Devi. And when we actually go brush our teeth, we are supposed to pray to the Devatas again. And in those days we used to have the tree, and therefore the tree was linked to the Vanaspati Devata, and we worship we chant a prayer to say, not just remove my dirt from the teeth, but also from my mind. And then when we bathe, that snanam, again we invoke Bhagavan. We invoke Bhagavan in the water that we actually take shower. We say Gange cha Yamune Devi, Godavari Saraswati, Narmadya Sindhu Kaveri, Jalesmin Sannitau Kuro. We look upon that snanam itself as Ganga water and the Abhishekam done to the Ishvara within us. Again, wearing cloth, new clothes, again we invoke Bhagavan. Whenever we get a new clothes, in those days at least, I remember even now we do, we will place it near the deity, and then we will actually apply some kumkum, chandan, and then do prostrations, thank the Ishvara, and then wear it. The presiding deity for clothes is called as Revati Devata. So right from early morning, when we actually step on the ground, Samudra Vasane Devi Parvata Sthana Mandale Vishnu Patni Namastubhyam Pada Sparsham Kshamasvame, where we actually take forgiveness from Bhuma Devi for stepping on her. Everything is Bhagavan centered. When we eat, there is something called Parseshna, or we say Annapurne Sadapurne Shankara Pranavallabe Jnana Vairagya Siddhyartham Bhikshan cha Parvati. Or there is a sloka in Bhagavad Gita which we use also. So right from waking up until we go to bed, before going to bed we seek forgiveness for all the mistakes that we had done for the day. Karacharana kritam va, kayajam karmajam va, shravana nayanajam va, manasam va, aparadam, vihitam avihitam va, sarvameda kshamasva, jai jai karunabde Sri Mahadeva Sambhu. So right from morning till evening, we are supposed to remember Ishvara, Bhagavan. That's why in our culture we say work is worship. That's why in those days when we say everything is considered to be duty or worship. In those days when we see even leave letters that are sent out by our parents or grandparents, would say, I will be joining duty. We'll never say work. So every activity is associated with Bhagavan. Everything has to be associated with Ishvara. And is it only for the daily activities that we need to remember Ishvara? Actually, no. Not only from the beginning of the day up to the end of the day. Our entire life, right from the time of conception, it starts with the remembrance of Bhagavan. The very everything happens along with the mantra, Vedic mantra there. The parents are supposed to remember Bhagavan, so that the conceived baby is well refined and cultured. There are 40 samskaras that are given for a human being, right from the birth until death. The final cremation itself is a yaga. Yajna or yaga, we can say, where we offer our own body to the Homakunda, to the Agni Bhagavan. So we associate everything to Bhagavan and Ishvara. From conception to creation, our life is Bhagavan-centered life. From waking up to sleep, our life is Bhagavan-centered life. Now, why did our scriptures do that way? Why do our scriptures prescribe a Ishvara-centered life? The reason is, according to our scriptures, Our primary relationship is with Bhagavan alone. Bhagavan, Ishvara, is our creator. We are the created being. Bhagavan is the cause. We are the effect. Just like we have this parent-child where the parent is the cause, the child is the effect, karanam karyam. Bhagavan is the cause, we are the effect, not just for this janma, for throughout, in every janma, in every srishti. This is not our first birth. We have had millions of janmas before. We could have millions of janmas also in future. So in every janma, Bhagavan is our creator. We are the created being. And we are related to this Bhagavan. And all our other relationship with whomever in this world, they are only temporary. The longest relationship that we can hope to have with any individual, it can last only for one life. Whether it's a relationship with our parents or mother, probably parents, mother is probably the maximum. It can last one life. Because in the previous life, we had some other parents. Who knows, maybe buffalo, lizard, snake, tree, whatever. We could have had some other parents. In the next janma, we will have some other parents. That means what? Human or any other relationship for that matter is only temporary. It's only incidental. It's empirical. It's only a relative. It's only for a short period of time. Whereas the primary and fundamental relationship is with Bhagavan. And this, the Vedas keep reminding us. It says, do not forget the fundamental relationship. And in our worldly interaction today, we are busy forming new relationships. We are busy nourishing the relationships. All that is all fine, wonderful, it's all okay, good. But it should never come at the cost of the fundamental relationship with Bhagavan. Then the next question comes, what happens when we lose sight of this fundamental relationship? The answer is life becomes directionless. Our life will have varieties of problems. It is like a rudderless boat. It can become a directionless boat if we lose this relationship with Bhagavan. In fact, scriptures say real prosperity in life is nothing but non-forgetfulness of our fundamental relationship with Bhagavan. That is the real prosperity. If the fundamental relationship is forgotten, even if we become materially rich, we can have a very prosperous life. We can be surrounded with money, but life will be full of problems. Even money, wealth can create its own set of problems. And that happens when the original sambandha, the original relationship is forgotten. We talk about how one should never forget his or her mother because she has given birth to us. Then what to talk about Ishvara, who is responsible for the entire creation, for our own creation. So these worldly tragedies that we get in our life are not real tragedy. The real tragedy is when somebody loses the sight of this fundamental relationship. And preserving the relationship between me and Ishvara, and nourishing this basic relationship. How do I do it? How can I do it? It can be done only through a religious, Ishvara-centered lifestyle. Because how can we actually generally nourish any relationship? Today we talk about creating relationships. Even in the corporate world, we talk about networking and creating relationships and others. Any relationship can be maintained only when we spend time with the other person. We need to spend some time, understand them, find out what they like, try to see if we can work according to them. And it is the same with Bhagavan also. So to maintain any relationship, we need to spend some time together. Unless we spend some quality time, relationship cannot be preserved. It cannot be nourished. And how can we now then nourish this relationship with Ishvara? So Vedas knew this principle, that one needs to have this relationship, every being needs to have this relationship with Ishvara, and therefore Vedas prescribed that we need to have quality time, exclusive time for Bhagavan, and we should have it in a regular manner. So our religious culture prescribed various forms of religious practice. Our religious practices are much more than any religion in the world. In many of the other religions, it's a weekly business. Sunday, Friday. Ours is repetitive, regular. Every day there is something or other. Today is Shashti, there is something. Then Chaturthi, there is anything. Amavasa, there is one religious connotation there. Paurnamasya, there is something. And then special months, then special periods, Mahalayam, certain nakshatras. So every day there is something or other. And when we practice this, when we do these religious practices, we are basically spending time with Bhagavan. We are giving some quality time to Bhagavan. Of course, this is apart from remembering Bhagavan at every activity in our life. Even before writing, we will normally, some people put this Pulayashuri. In Tamil we say Pulayashuri. Or we say Hari Om. We write at the top of the paper. So everything is preceded by Bhagavan. Every activity of ours is preceded by Bhagavan, remembering Bhagavan. And these rituals have been given so that we are in a position to spend some quality time with Bhagavan. And to actually practice this, we should know both the theory as well as the principle behind every religious practice. Because any practice will become purposeful only when we understand the principle behind it. So we should know what is the significance, and then we should also be able to follow it. Because without the knowledge of the principle, without that knowledge of the theory, the practice becomes empty. It becomes mechanical. We do, and if the practice becomes mechanical, we do it for some days and then it will drop off. We will lose interest in those practices. We will start questioning them. And therefore, many of those religious or ritual practices have actually in fact disappeared. So the next question then comes, what should we do? What should we do to not drop these rituals? Of course, the answer is, the first is learning the theory part. That theory, that knowledge should precede any practice. And it is true in all forms of things, right? Even in our other fields. When we want to sing, you want to practice music, then there is a study of theory also there. They will teach you what is Arohanam, Avarohanam, what is Talam, what is Raga, what is Swaram, what is Jandavarisai, all those things in Carnatic music. We have to learn what are the Talams involved, what are the Ragams involved, what is Adi Talam, all those Misra Chapu, all those things. And it's the same. Even with driving, if you want to learn driving, then theory is first. Where is the gearbox? What is the gear for? What is the accelerator? Where is the brake? What is the brake for? Same thing with cooking. Same thing with asanas or whatever. So in the Vedic culture also, they prescribed 2 exercises. The first one is the thorough study of all the principles behind these religious practices. And then the practice of them. And these principles have been clearly explained in our scriptures. Every aspect of it has been explained in our scriptures. Everything as to why we have to do this, what for we are doing this, everything has been explained. So for us to be able to practice something as a religious ritual, then scriptural study becomes important. It becomes a compulsory step. It becomes a preliminary step. It becomes a necessity. And only if the scriptures are studied, we will know the principles, the philosophy, the theory behind it, behind every practice that we do. And this theory will have to be then followed by all the practice. So study is also required, practice is also required. Both of them are equally important. First we will have to study so that we are able to practice them properly. And therefore, all our acharyas, all our gurus have said that everyone to compulsorily study the scriptures, to understand the theory, the principle behind the religious life. As I say, Swadhyayam. It's called a Swadhyayam. In those days, when the Vedic tradition was still alive, everybody went to Gurukula. Whether it was a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra, everybody went to Gurukula. They, of course, each one studied their own skill for their livelihood. So everybody followed their own skill that they follow at home for their studies. But apart from that, all of them uniformly studied the principles behind a religious life in the Gurukula. And Vedic study was compulsory for all. We have already seen what is this Vedic study. Vedas are our manual. When anything is created, there is a manual given along with it. So when Ishvara created this world, the Vedas are the manual. The do's and don'ts, how to actually use your body, how to use your mind, how to use this world, how to understand what can be done, what can be expected, what to be done, what to be achieved. Everything has been given in the Vedas. So those study was incorporated in the Gurukula system. And therefore, once a person comes out of the Gurukula and the person gets married, the person strikes many relationships. But in and through all those relationships, the person should not forget the fundamental relationship with Ishvara. And we had a lifestyle prescribed according to the age, according to their age, according to their... There was also something on Varna, there was also a prescription based on ashrama. So if you look at ashrama, after the studies, the person comes out, the person gets into grihastha ashrama. Ashrama meaning a lifestyle. And that grihastha ashrama is an Ishvara-centered lifestyle. And what happens if the lifestyle is not Ishvara-centered? Then it will become a shrama. Shrama means we know. Shramam. It means anxiety, there will be fight, there will be quarrel, there will be tension. If we don't bring Bhagavan in our life, then we will be bringing tension, anxiety, quarrel, sorrow, anger, jealousy, pride, those things in our life. Things that can make our life become difficult. So whether married life should be shrama or ashrama, it will depend on whether it is Ishvara-centered or not. Now the next question. In those days we had Gurukula. Now how can we do the scriptural study these days? Study of scriptures is an extremely difficult project. The first and foremost reason is our scriptural literature is vast. It's very vast. We had spent some time in the introduction to Vedanta itself in terms of what these are. We had seen the Vedas itself has got 4, and each of those Vedas are huge. So Chatvari Vedas we have. Then we have, within these Vedas we have multiple Upanishads. The 4 Vedas, what are they? Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda and Atharvana Veda. And within that 4 Vedas, we had Samhita portion, Brahmana portion, Aranyaka portion and Upanishad portion. And within that Upanishads, we had more than hundreds of Upanishads. But of course today it's about 11 or 12 is still kind of functional. Ishavasya Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Katha Upanishad, Prashna Upanishad, we have about 10 to 12. And then on top of these Vedas, we had these sutras. We had Dharma Sutras, Grihya Sutras, Shrauta Sutras, Brahma Sutra. We have Apastampa Sutra, Bodhayana Sutra. Each one written by a rishi based on the Vedic Vedas. Then we had Smriti. We had Manusmriti, Parashara Smriti, Yajnavalkya Smriti. We had so much of literature there that needs to be studied. And then to make it easy for us to understand some of these concepts, we had Puranas. We have 18 Puranas. Bhagavad Purana, Linga Purana, Garuda Purana, Matsya Purana, all those things, Shiva Purana. Then we have 18 Upa Puranas. Then we have Itihasas, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Mahabharata alone is about 1 lakh verses. And then on top of all these things, then there are these Bhashyams. Bhashyams written by various gurus, acharyas who had come in various points of life, including Adi Shankaras. So the scriptures are huge, vast. It's voluminous. And then to understand some of these scriptures, we'll have to understand grammar. We'll have to understand those Shadangas. We should understand Nirukta, Kalpa, Vyakarana. All those things has to be understood. There is Chandas for the meter, all those things. So right now people do not have the time to study the scriptures because we are all busy. Right from the morning till the evening, we rush to the office, we have some our own work, and sometimes we may have to connect at various time zones. It is not possible for us to spend some time to study the scriptures. And even if we study the scriptures, it seems to be so vast. We'll never be able to finish it in one lifetime. There is a Subhashtam which says, Ananda Shastram Bahuvedi Ananda Shastram Bahuvedi Alpascha Kalo Bhahavascha Vignaha. Ananta Shastram. Scriptures are many. Bahuvedi there are plenty of things to study. Alpascha Kalo. Time is very limited. And within this limited time, the obstacles are too many. Bhahavascha Vignaha. Whenever we want to study something, there is something or other that comes in. We are not able to spend some time. Even if we want to study, say, Bhagavad Gita, for example, we decide to actually attend a class every week. 3 classes down the line or 1 class down, 4 classes down the line, there will be something, some guests at home or something where we have to go out. There will be always some problem. Whenever we want to do something good, all this Vignaha will come. All these obstacles will come. To sit for 1 hour in the class, we will have lot of disturbance. Within the house, outside the house. But if we have to watch a movie for 3 hours, there will be no disturbance. Or if you want to watch a match, cricket match, tennis match, we will ensure that there are no disturbances, not even phone calls. But that's the problem. Anything that good we want to do, there will be always some obstacles. So Ananta Shastram, Bahuvedi Tavyam, there are so much to study and we don't have enough time. Alpascha Kalu. So if we are not able to study the scriptures, then we should at least study the essence of our scriptures. What does it say? Just like as the swan, we say, takes the milk out of the milk and water together, mixture. In the same way, we should be able to take the Sara of our scriptures. And Shankaracharya, in his introductory commentary to Bhagavad Gita, says, people are busy and extrovert. And Shankaracharya says this more than 2000 years ago. He says, people are busy and extrovert. Their materialistic desires have increased. He is complaining about this in BC. And he says, these desires have increased, and therefore this Bhagavad Gita is essential, because Bhagavan Krishna has taken the essence of all these shastras. He has condensed them. He has given it in the form of Bhagavad Gita. This one textbook alone is enough for this lifetime. This one text alone is enough to comprehensively understand our scriptures, to understand our religious culture, to understand what is our Vedic culture, to understand how to lead a Bhagavan-centered life, to understand the principles behind every religious practice. This one scripture is enough. This one scripture is enough to understand the philosophy behind it. so that when we practice it, we are able to establish that relationship with the Ishvara. That fundamental relationship is nourished. And therefore, we don't have this anxiety, fear, all these problems. So every Hindu, Acharya says, every Hindu, every person, every human being must compulsorily study Bhagavad Gita. At least the Bhagavad Gita. And that too not casually, not just verse by verse. One purport, okay, I've finished. It has to be done in a thorough manner. It has to be done in a systematic manner. Basically because there are concepts that would have to be explained in detail when we come to the shloka. The shloka itself will say something, but to understand that shloka, we'll have to understand the concept behind it, which will need some explanation. And this Bhagavad Gita, we should be able to go through, understand this in our lifetime at least once properly, thoroughly. Bhagavad Gita should be made compulsory. Whether one is a spiritual seeker or not, one need not be a spiritual seeker. But just to understand our culture, to understand our heritage, to understand the place from where we were born, to understand our tradition, to understand our roots, Bhagavad Gita study is compulsory. If we become a spiritual seeker, if we are a spiritual seeker, then all the more Bhagavad Gita becomes relevant. And then once we are done with Bhagavad Gita, we can go into Upanishads. And if we don't study Bhagavad Gita, our religious practices will become mechanical, and sooner or later we will drop them. Everything will look empty. Either we will have guilt because we have dropped certain things, or we don't see a value in it and therefore we will drop them. Today, a lot of those things have been dropped off. Upasana was a compulsory fire ritual that every grahastha should follow. We don't do it. Panchamahayajnas have to be followed by everyone. We don't do that. Still, some people are holding on to Gayatri Mantra, and that is the only thing that is still probably not fully disappeared yet. And what happens if these things get dropped off? When these things get dropped off, it gets filled up. When religious culture goes down, materialistic culture takes over. When dharma goes down, adharma takes over. It's never a neutral. It doesn't go into the neutral state. It goes from this end to that end. And in materialistic culture, we will have everything, but the heart will be empty. The mind will be always heavy. In religious culture, materially we might be empty, but the heart will be full. Materialistic culture, we may have palatial house, we may have all the cars, we would have seen so many places in the world. We could have had the most modern gadgets, the latest technology. But still, in heart of hearts, there will be always heaviness. A spiritual life alone gives us the fullness. In those days, our ancestors, they had very little comforts. In today, what is considered to be necessities, in those days were extreme comforts. Today, a fan, forget fan, even an air conditioner seems to be a necessity in summers. In those days, people did not have electricity. Still they were able to live. Still they were happy. What has been taken as granted as need in these days were luxuries in those days. Still people were happy. A spiritual life will give us the fullness. And today we don't have Gurukulas. We don't have Gurukulas to understand the scriptures. But at least there are various institutions that have come up who have taken upon themselves to spread our culture. Whether it is Arsha Vidya Gurukulam, Chinmaya Mission, or Swami Omkarananda, Chidbhavananda Ashram. There are many of those things that have come up. So that there is an opportunity for each one of us, for everyone, to study the Bhagavad Gita systematically, verse by verse, thoroughly, deeply. And remember, it is not just studying. Studying alone is not enough. What we have studied, it has to be internalized. It has to be assimilated so that it reflects in our day-to-day life. Gita is not just mere studying like a physics or chemistry, many of the school subjects that we studied. It is for studying and being able to write in the exam. It was nothing for internalization, nothing for assimilation, nothing that needs to be reflected in our day-to-day life. Whereas Gita is not for studying, it is meant for living. And they say, Acharyat padam adate, padam sishyam swameva dahe, padam cha brahmacharibhyah, padam kalakramena cha. So there are 4 parts when we study. The first quarter is we gather that knowledge. There are 4 parts of knowledge. The first quarter of knowledge we get when we study. Acharyat padam adate. So when Guru teaches us, we get the 1/4. The next 4th we have to gather by going back and revising. So padam sishya swayam daya. Swamedaya means one he has to do it on his own. Then the next quarter is when you discuss with others. Padam cha brahmacharibhyah. When we discuss with others, like-minded people, satsangs, when we go there, we get the 3rd quarter. And then padam kalakramena cha. The last quarter we will only gather by alert living. We have to watch, constantly ask ourselves. We have to constantly reflect where we are, how we are doing. Is my life in line with the teachings of Gita? That only we should be able to do. Only we can do. Whatever we learn in this Gita, couple of things. It is not going to change the world. It is not about changing the situation around me. This Gita is not about evaluating and making others change their behavior towards me. This Gita is for self. And another thing, just by coming to Gita class, one is not going to get some sudden fame, richness, rich wealth, or some jobs that issues in jobs getting overcome. Nothing of that sort is being promised. But what we can definitely see is when we systematically and consistently study and try to assimilate the concepts of Gita, we would see a general calmness in our mind. we will be able to see that we get more contented. We will see that we are more calm. We are able to express compassion. We are much more liked by people, generally speaking, because we will be able to reflect those good qualities. And by reflecting that, we will be able to see that our problems around us do not seem to be as bad as what they were some time back. So regular study of Gita, although Bhagavan also promises that a regular study of Gita will give you spiritual growth as well as material progress. Regular study and implementation, because the concept of Karma Yoga is about, when we do Karma Yoga, we will be able to progress both spiritually as well as materially. We will see that the material progress is a byproduct. It is not the main product. The main aim for studying Gita is for spiritual progress. And that we will be able to, once we are in this path consistently over a few years, we will be able to see our difference. This is what I wanted to actually discuss about the greatness of Gita and why we should study Gita. Next class we will go through some of the introduction, some basic human problems, basic human goals, and where does this Vedanta or Gita fit in. And then afterwards we will start the Gita lessons, or we will go into the chapters of Gita. If there are any questions or comments, you can feel free to unmute and share. Anyone? Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Very much so.
Okay. So if there is nothing, then we'll meet again in the next class. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishaha. Gobhrahmanebhyo Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah.